Boeing promised airlines the future of aviation in 2016, but 7 years past its deadline, the 777X has become a $50 billion monument to corporate failure. The world's largest twin-engine jetliner sits trapped in certification purgatory, while airlines watch their carefully planned fleets crumble into chaos. What was supposed to be Boeing's redemption after the 737 MAX disasters has instead exposed something far more disturbing. A company that learned nothing from its deadliest mistakes, now locked in bureaucratic warfare with regulators who refuse to look away. The promise that Boeing made in November 2013 sounded almost too good to be true. They unveiled the 777X with the kind of swagger that only comes from decades of market dominance, declaring it would be the most fuel-efficient wide-body airliner ever built, 12% better than the competition, 12% that would translate into hundreds of millions in savings for airlines over the aircraft's lifetime. The specifications read like aviation fantasy. A wingspan of 235 feet, so massive the wingtips would fold to fit standard airport gates, engines producing 110,000 pounds of thrust each, the most powerful commercial jet engines ever manufactured, a range of 8,600 nautical miles, capable of connecting virtually any two cities on Earth non-stop. It was supposed to enter service in 2020, replacing aging 777s and 747s while crushing Airbus's A350 ambitions. Airlines couldn't sign contracts fast enough. Emirates ordered 150 units. Qatar Airways, Lufthansa, Singapore Airlines, they all lined up, committing billions based on Boeing's timeline and promises. The order book swelled past 350 aircraft worth over $150 billion at list prices. But here's the thing about promises in aviation. They're written in ink, delivered in blood. Boeing had just signed the most expensive promissory note in commercial aviation history, and the clock was already ticking toward disaster. The unraveling began not with a bang, but with a sickening crack that echoed through Boeing's Everett facility in September 2019. During a ground test, one of those massive folding wingtips, the engineering marvel that was supposed to revolutionize airport operations, catastrophically failed. The structure didn't just bend or buckle, it exploded, separating completely from the aircraft at pressures far below certification requirements. Boeing's engineers stared at the wreckage, and the implications hit like a freight train. This wasn't a minor setback. The entire wing structure would need redesigning, retesting, recertifying. Months of delays materialized overnight. But that was just the opening act. Then came the 737 MAX nightmare. 2 crashes, 346 dead, and suddenly the Federal Aviation Administration wasn't Boeing's friendly partner anymore. The cozy relationship that had allowed Boeing to essentially self-certify aircraft evaporated. The FAA, bloodied by congressional investigations and public outrage, transformed into an adversary determined to prove it hadn't been captured by the industry it regulated. Every 777X system now faced microscopic scrutiny. The flight control software, the cockpit displays, the engine management systems, everything Boeing had designed with the old playbook suddenly required new levels of documentation, testing, and validation. What should have taken months stretched into years. 2020 arrived. The 777X didn't. Boeing announced the first delay, then another. Then they stopped announcing dates altogether, offering only vague assurances about ongoing certification activities. Airlines that had retired older aircraft in anticipation of deliveries scrambled to lease replacements at premium rates. Route plans collapsed. Financial projections disintegrated. Behind closed doors, the numbers told a horror story. Boeing had invested over $20 billion in development costs. Each month of delay added another $200 million in expenses. The program's break-even point, originally calculated at around 400 aircraft sales, kept climbing. Some analysts whispered it might never break even at all. But here's what made the situation truly catastrophic. Boeing couldn't walk away. Cancelling the program would mean refunding deposits, paying penalties, and admitting defeat to Airbus. They were trapped in a death spiral of their own creation, hemorrhaging cash while producing an aircraft nobody could legally fly. The ghost plane had become a money furnace, and Boeing kept shoveling in billions, hoping somehow the flames would eventually produce something they could sell. The 737 MAX shadow that fell across the 777X program wasn't just metaphorical. It was a complete systemic collapse of the relationship between Boeing and the regulators, who were supposed to keep the flying public safe. To understand how deep the betrayal ran, consider this. Boeing had been allowed to essentially certify its own aircraft for decades through a program called Organization Designation Authorization. The FAA trusted Boeing's engineers to act as de facto regulators, signing off on safety-critical systems with minimal government oversight. Then, the MAX killed 346 people because of a flawed system called MCS that pilots didn't even know existed. Congressional investigations revealed Boeing had hidden critical information, pressured engineers to rush approvals, and prioritized profit over safety with such brazen disregard that criminal charges followed. The company paid $2.5 billion in settlements, admitting employees had deceived regulators. The FAA's reputation lay in ruins. Agency officials faced congressional hearings where legislators demanded to know how Boeing had been allowed to run wild. The answer was simple and damning: regulatory capture. The FAA had become so intertwined with Boeing that it had forgotten its primary mission was protecting passengers, not protecting Boeing's bottom line. Everything changed overnight. The cozy relationship evaporated, replaced by adversarial scrutiny that would haunt every Boeing program for years. When the 777X came up for certification, FAA inspectors arrived with the zeal of reformed sinners. Every line of code, every structural calculation, every test result faced questioning that bordered on paranoia. But could anyone blame them? They'd been burned, humiliated, and dragged through public hearings for trusting Boeing. The irony was almost poetic. The 777X had nothing to do with the MAX disasters. Different team, different aircraft, different systems. But it didn't matter. Boeing's sins on one program had poisoned the well for every program. The company had spent decades building trust, then incinerated it in pursuit of quarterly earnings targets. Now the 777X sat in certification purgatory, paying the price for crimes committed by its smaller sibling. Boeing had created its own prison, and there was no early release for good behavior. The regulatory transformation was complete, irreversible, and absolutely devastating to Boeing's timeline. The boardroom battlefield where Boeing now fights for survival makes corporate war rooms look like kindergarten playgrounds. Emirates President Tim Clark, a man who'd spent $40 billion on Boeing aircraft over his career, went public with fury that shook the industry. His airline had ordered 115 777X jets, restructured its entire fleet strategy around delivery promises, and watched those promises evaporate like desert rain. Clark didn't mince words. He called Boeing's timeline complete fiction and suggested the aircraft might not enter service until 2027 or later. Other airline executives, bound by confidentiality agreements and desperate not to lose their place in the delivery queue, whispered similar frustrations in private. They'd paid deposits, retired older aircraft, turned down Airbus alternatives, all betting on Boeing's word. Now they faced financial carnage. Leasing replacement aircraft cost fortunes. Routes planned around the 777X's range and efficiency couldn't be operated profitably with older, thirstier jets. Some airlines had already sold 747s and 777s to competitors, burning bridges they couldn't uncross. But here's the truly diabolical part. Boeing knew the airlines couldn't walk away. Switching to Airbus meant joining a production queue stretching years into the future. The airlines were hostages, locked into contracts with a manufacturer that had systematically destroyed its own credibility. Boeing's $50 billion lie had trapped everyone in a nightmare with no exit. The $50 billion question that now haunts aviation isn't whether the 777X will eventually fly passengers. It's whether the entire system of aircraft development has fundamentally broken. Boeing burned through decades of trust in pursuit of shareholder value, then discovered trust can't be rebuilt with quarterly earnings reports. The FAA, scorched by the MAX disasters, swung so far toward caution that innovation itself became suspect. Somewhere between Boeing's reckless cost-cutting and the FAA's paralytic overcorrection lies the future of aviation, and nobody knows where that balance point exists anymore. The 777X sits trapped in this no man's land, a technological marvel held hostage by sins it didn't commit, and regulations designed to prevent disasters it never caused. Industry analysts whisper about a chilling possibility, that the 777X might be the last clean-sheet wide-body airliner Boeing ever develops. The financial carnage, the reputational damage, the regulatory nightmare. It's created a template for failure so comprehensive that future Boeing executives might simply refuse to risk it. Airbus watches from across the Atlantic, learning lessons written in Boeing's blood and treasure. The ghost plane may eventually enter service, years late and billions over budget. But the real cost isn't measured in dollars or delays, it's measured in the paralysis of an entire industry, frozen between the memory of what happens when safety is sacrificed and the reality of what happens when innovation becomes impossible. Boeing's $50 billion lie taught everyone a lesson. The tragedy is nobody wanted to learn it this way.